हिरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम् लोके सज्जनषट्पदैरहरहः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमला प्रध्वंसिनः श्रेयसे मोक्तं करोति वाचालम् पङ्गुल्लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तन्न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः. Does that have dhyana shloka?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's all I want. I don't know what I did with my book. It seemed, yeah, that one I had. I don't know where it went. Here, I'll exchange for this class. This also has to go on or no?
Yes. Please. Are we doing this again, Swamiji?
We will be studying that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot there was class. I thought, okay, holiday.
Me too.
Huh?
It nearly took a holiday. I just got back.
Yeah?
I was wet.
You got lost?
I took a route that she had shown after I did 2 of those.
Yeah.
She had shown me chambers in LA but climb yesterday.
Huh.
And I went up and it rained and Happy Day went all over and I just got back.
She went across school and, you know.
Talked to a few strangers, asked them where the friendly store is. They all seem very friendly.
Yeah. I'm glad you're back. That was good. Very nice. Wonderful. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The focus on knowledge and karma, meaning dharma here, which are the 2 topics in the Bhagavad Gita. These are the 2 topics, dharma and karma. And dharma / karma, and then what? Knowledge. And as long as you take, and this is where we left off yesterday, we take one as the rungs of the ladder. Which one? Dharma / karma as the rungs of the ladder, and then that leads to the preparation for knowledge. That's the vista after climbing up the ladder. You can see, yeah, you can see the whole, you can see the whole, full stop. And this is what the whole thing is. if this is not understood, and if dharma or karma becomes the end, then there is nothing more to do, really. And so out of these two focuses, which really is foci, these two emphases has come about two lifestyles. Yeah. The one that focuses on knowledge alone says, why bother with karma? Why bother? Why bother with action when what I want is knowledge? So why should I act? And it seems like a straight flight without stops. Moksha express, correct? What I want? Liberation. What is the cause of bondage? Ignorance. So what is the antidote of ignorance? Knowledge. What kind of knowledge? Self-knowledge. Because the ignorance is centered on not the Jagat, myself. So, therefore, this is as clear as 2 plus 2. So if I want moksha, then why should I weed? I have to weed that out. I have to weed out the weeding, because why should I weed? Why should I take out the garbage? Forget cooking, cleaning. I'm even talking of these other things. Why should I go to market? Why should I reproduce that which traps me? Because karma binds. And what does moksha do? Frees. So what do I want? Well, knowledge frees, karma binds. Alright, take your pick. Who will pick karma? No one in their right mind, correct? Yeah. So this is called Moksha Express. And the train is painted orange outside. Inside also, all the orange beings get in. Correct? And then you have to hold on for dear life, because once it takes off, it has no stops. It's faster than a bullet train because it goes straight. And it has the final station, Moksha. That's the only place. That's the only stop. One and only stop. And the other one is the milk run. Right? Yeah. It stops every single, and such trains are like that in India. Like if you go from Coimbatore to Chennai, it's an overnight journey. It's not really an overnight journey. Actually, if the roads were American roads, it could be completed in 4 hours. Easily. But being Indian roads means more holes than roads. Yeah, than the surface. Like American jeans and Indian roads are one and the same. Holy jeans and holy roads. That's all it is. So then, so of course it takes 8 hours. It shouldn't, but it does. And then it doesn't quite take 8 hours, maybe 6 or 7. But then, it's not, it's very unseemly. Nobody will take that train if it departs at 9 o'clock and reaches there at 2 o'clock. In fact, nobody will get off. They'll continue sleeping, being Indian train. And you don't want that. You don't want the people to not get off. So it should get there at a decent time. So they engineer it to stop in every village possible. Every village you knew, every village you did not know, every village you wished you knew, every village you wished you did not know, every village you wished did not exist. This train will stop. And sometimes the stops are, by the time it even picks up speed, it slows down and stops. And then, even though these stops have been very nicely calibrated, in between there'll be some other small villages which don't even have stations, which you have to cross the tracks and then go into the woods, cross the woods, and there is the hamlet, the villages. And the villagers help themselves by pulling this chain which says to stop train, pull chain. So they help themselves. And then of course in small print it says penalty for pulling it in a non-emergency situation is 6 months of jail or a hefty fine. It says that. But who reads? Who knows how to read, first of all? Something is written there. Yeah, that was what must be written. If you pull, it will stop. That's all is written. And then who is going to catch? Because these people have got down. And then even if they are caught, they will say, this is a great emergency. My village is coming. I have to get off. I have children. I have family. I'm coming after selling vegetables in the city. I have to go. Reach home. So already there are, 35 stops. And then the villagers help themselves to another 50 stops. And then the journey seems, interminable. I mean, it's like, oh my God, because each time the people are crowding the train and every surface is taken up except your lap, and that is also lapped up, that is also taken up. There's no place. You keep, becoming small, and then there is constrictions on all sides, kind of like samsara. And there is the train, samsara. You have no elbow room, and the person sitting next to you is sleeping on your shoulder happily. Everything happens in Indian trains. Yeah. One time I was going, and in the ashram they packed me a bag with a towel on it, and it was just there. It had some rotis, dosa, something it had. Then the woman sitting next to me took the towel and blew her nose very heartily in the towel. And I think I must have looked shocked because it was just sitting there, the bag underneath the seat, and I was not paying much attention to it. I was not hungry and I didn't want to eat it, and it was just there. And there was some the tiffin carrier and a little banana, 2 bananas or something wrapped in a nice towel. And she blew on both sides heartily, and then when I must have really looked shocked. She looked a little guilty, folded it up and said, take. I said, no, you keep it, it's a present. Have it. So, this is called the Moksha Milk Run. That is also headed to the same place, correct? But there is a lot of jostling, there is a lot of competing for seats. You know how to book a seat on these kinds of trains? How? Put a hanky when? Hanky-panky. Even before it stops, you have to run the length of the train and then take off your turban, hanky, any single thing, and throw it through the window. Yeah. And of course somebody else who has managed to climb will dislodge it and sit there also. So there's a lot of wrestling for seats. There's a lot of things. And then along with you, the chickens travel. They cluck, 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 they come out under the seat. Yeah, and one time, one of them laid an egg right there. Brahmanda, anda means egg. So then, they lay eggs, and then the goats, and then suddenly you have you feel compelled, and you wonder what happened, and then your scarf is being, scarfed down by a goat, right there. These things happen in the villages. So goats come, chicken come, some dogs, cats, everything travels with you. This is the samsara. And, needless to say, even though it is entertaining, it is not pleasant, correct? Yeah. But then what happens is that it is still, even this slow train, what is this slow train? The Moksha Milk Run, which stops at every single stop and non-stop also, even in a non-stop it stops. And this kind of a journey, that is also headed there, provided, it also leads to moksha, freedom from want, from being a wanting person, from being a person that is feeling bound. It also goes there. But the question is, how? That's the question. The question is not when, but how. It all depends upon the attitude. Yeah. Because even though we have described 2 trains, one of them seems to be full of like-minded individuals in orange, and they are just happily, merrily on their way, and the other one seems, and needless embroiling in all the things and all the kinds of people that I never wish I had met, then what? Which seems better? The first one definitely seems better. And what does the, and the Gita's message says, not necessarily. Not necessarily is the first one better. Not necessarily is the second one bad. It just depends on the readiness. You have to be ready to get into that other one, because there are no stops, no entertainment, no chai, nothing, no seller comes, no station, very boring, no lights, no fan, nothing. Very boring. You have to generate your own entertainment. And you have to recharge your own batteries by yourself. You cannot depend on the Jagat to recharge your batteries. So this is one thing. That's not necessarily nice. And this one is also not necessarily nice, not necessarily bad. This one, in order to last through the night to get to the next station, or live through this samsara to get to moksha, what one has to do, you cannot change the people around you. To the fellow snoring on your shoulder, even if you make him get up and prop him up, this is all, I have seen all this. Right next to me, in front of me it was happening. This man lay down happily on the other man, and the other man was irritated, annoyed beyond existence. So he said, "Hey, wake up." Oh, sorry. Woke up again and again and again. And then, did this man give up? No, he was very determined. He was one of those city people and had no tolerance for this kind of a thing. And then finally what he did was, he said, "Look, don't use me as a prop, okay?" And to this end, to gain a distance between him and the other fellow, put his hand like this on the man's face. And the man happily slept on that. That's when he said, then his hand started to ache. And then he said, "All right, fine." And I was watching this, and a few hours later, he was also sleeping on him. I said, "Good. All the resistance has broken." This is what one has to do, because the fellow who is snoring on you, you cannot make that fellow get up. That fellow may be full of tamas. And you cannot, fault the world for being full of tamas. Tamas has a place. Really? Tamas has a place, yes. Because otherwise, how will it bring, if you don't encounter tamas, how will it bring out the sattva in you? That is its place. It acts as an irritant to polish you. And sometimes only because of the irritant, there are pearls, like even in the oyster. This is a Vedic example. In the oyster, this little being is there. And it's not saying, "Oh, let me make pearls for wealthy ladies." It's not having that thought. Fresh water pearls, salt water pearls, natural pearls. It's not having that thought. It's just trying to live and survive and defend itself. Then the wave comes and deposits some sand, small grain of sand in the oyster, in the shell. And first the shell clams up, literally, and then the insect inside, this being inside, feels attacked, irritated by this irritant. And what does it do? It secretes a juice out of itself and spins, and it comes with a natural hole because it has to live in it. So it spins it around it. And then after its life is gone, it dies away. This is the pearl. You see what I'm saying? So likewise, all these irritants of samsara bring out you in the form of the pearl. Bring out pearls of wisdom. So this gharshana, this rubbing, this constant friction is like being tumbled along with other stones, and the brightness, the facets come come out, the strength comes out. So the milk run is not a waste, really. And neither is better, neither is worse. And both are committed lifestyles, not leading to moksha, not really leading to moksha. The lifestyle doesn't lead to moksha. You have to understand that. Even if you are sitting in orange under a tree or whatever it is, or in a cave, knowledge is not going to be, happy and come and sit inside you. What binds? Ignorance. What liberates? Knowledge. Knowledge liberates. Lifestyle does not liberate. So the one who is in orange also has to assimilate the knowledge. The one who is an orangeade wannabe also has to assimilate the knowledge. So the knowledge here is the focus, not the lifestyle. The choice is not at the level of should I study or should I hold my nose or hold my toes. That's not the choice. The choice is, should I get on the fast track train or should I go about with my life having all these other priorities until I am able to drop them, or until they drop from me, even better. Because even the dropping is actionless. It happens. So these are the choices. The choice is not should I study or should I meditate? Should I study or should I cut up vegetables? Should I study or should I weed? That's not the choice. Choiceless is the study, because study of Vedanta, the truth of myself as the whole, is what liberates. And samsara is a notion that there are things that constrict my style, that there are things which bother me, around me, in me, outside of me, near me. The source of that botheration is centered on I. The source of the liberation is also centered on I. And the I happens to be naturally free. This has to be discovered, uncovered. The covering is ajnanam, ignorance. This is what it is. About how to go about it is there are two possible choices. Not in the act of study itself. Not in the focus of the study. Not in study being the end, the goal. But how to go about it? How to go about pursuing my studies that free me from samsara, that is where we have the choice. Coming out of the two kinds of focus we saw in the introductory bhashya of the Bhagavad Gita. The one on dharma, which is the first portion of the Veda, elucidating dharma, karma, what to do, how to do, what is enjoined. And in fact, the first portion of the Veda is all about keeping busy. Yeah, because if you are not keeping busy, what will happen? The mind will keep you busy. No, mind will get busy. An idle mind is a raga dvesha workshop. That's what it is. All the ragas come in and fill, and the ragas ebb away, and the tide of dvesha comes, and then dvesha raga come together, and sometimes both of them go away and you say aha, and before you say the ha of the ah, it comes back. And so therefore the body and the mind are kept busy doing what one is supposed to do. And therefore in the Veda there are vihita karmas. Vihita karmas means prescribed actions. All of them are sacred because I learned to do them in a sacred way. There is no mundane action. From cooking, cleaning, everything. Those are all mindfully and prayerfully done. What is mindfully done is prayerful, and prayerfulness is really mindfulness. A mind that is full of prayer is mindful. And so first the prayer is discrete act, and then I grow into a person whose attitude is prayerful all the time. And it's that attitude with which I do the actions, with which I conduct my affairs, with which I do my, I relate to people. So this is the growth that needs to happen in order to assimilate this knowledge. And so for the growth, the Jagat and all the chickens and the cattle and the sleeping people therein and the irritants therein become a nimitta, a cause, for a potential cause for my growth. So this is the stomping ground, and in this stomping ground there are many opportunities, especially the opportunities which appear distasteful. I have to rub my hands in glee because I have been given this opportunity, and that is where the most growth is, and that is where the most growth happens. And that is why those opportunities have to be taken. Otherwise, if one is not ready and one gets into the fast train, of this Krishna has to say in the 5th chapter, Sannyasastu mahabaho dukkhamaptum ayogatah yoga yukto munir brahma na chirena adhigacchati. Renunciation, which is the fast track to knowledge, which is not accompanied by the right attitude, karma yoga, to be able to make peace with the Jagat in and out, inner Jagat, outer Jagat. Dukkham aptum, it is very difficult to have. Without yoga, renunciation has no meaning. But the one who is a proper striver, not aimlessly striving, but a proper yogi, yatnashilaha, munihi, mananashilaha, the one with viveka, who is striving in the right direction, in the correct way, who is equipped with karma yoga, and we'll see what that is, who is equipped with the proper way of assimilating the things that I find around me, the proper way of growing into acceptance of all the things that there are, reaches moksha very quickly. So even though it's the milk run, it's actually the fast train somehow. Why? Because you have picked up speed. It may be still limping, but nothing bothers you. You have grown by leaps and bounds, and you have really gained the speed of assimilating the knowledge. You have become a person without buttons or threads. Yes. Nobody can push you, Nobody can push any button, and there, because all the buttons are useless buttons, just there for alankara. There are no threads either. Nobody can, somebody asked Swamiji in one satsang, people are screwing me over, what should I do? This is what they asked. And Swamiji said, lose the threads. Lose all the threads. Because screw means what? You have to be hooked in. Those threads must be there like these, those spiraling threads. And those threads are your own ragadveshas which fix you in, and you feel like somebody is operating upon me with a screwdriver, and I feel all tight and tightened according to somebody else's will, And then what? Lose the threads. Whether it is Philip or the screwdriver, nobody can get to you. Nobody can get to you. And this is what the whole thing is. So it's about losing the buttons, losing the threads, losing any surface which can contact the ragadvesha jagged edges. Yeah. The crashing wave of samsara, if it is taken properly, can make a rock in the middle of the ocean with jagged edges into a Shivalinga over time. Shivalinga is smooth. There is nothing that can catch. Human being little more difficult. Because there is free will. The rock doesn't resist. That's what the whole thing is. So here, these two lifestyles, two committed lifestyles are set out right at the beginning. by the Bhagavad Gita. And in Adi Shankara's commentary, he speaks about them. And he says that the first portion of the Veda, talking about what to do, when to do, how to do, what not to do, when not to do, when certain things should be done, when certain things should never be done, all these things are not a waste. They help in the growth, because without growth, the knowledge will not speak. So therefore, Karma Yoga is as a Shastra. It's the science, it's the teaching. Shasanat Trayate, that which protects upon learning, is called Yoga Shastra. This Karma Yoga, we'll be seeing it in detail, but in very brief, Karma Yoga is a lifestyle of growth, of growing into acceptance of what is, and discovering that what is Bhagavan, is Ishvara, and being at peace with what is. That is Karma Yoga. And so here I use the very dharma and karma that are there to transform me by changing my attitude towards the people in my life, towards the work in my life, towards the Jagat. This is what the whole thing is. But there is some way in which what happens as a result of that is that naturally, there is a way in which it naturally graduates or culminates into renunciation. And this renunciation is ripens one further for knowledge. So really speaking, we are not in a hurry for this knowledge. Why? Because that is the end. That is the end. And even if we are in a hurry and say quickly, Tattvamasi, what happened? Nothing happened. Correct? So you savor and enjoy. You take the time. You smell a few roses here and there. You take the time to be in it. It's like the gulab jamun we had. When it comes hot of the oil of samsara, I'm mixing metaphors, but you understand. This jiva, then what? Very fried and very tried. I have just emerged out of the hot oil, and then, because of the previous punya karma, gets into the classroom, which is the sugar syrup, Vedanta. Shh, makes that sound also. A sound of relief. Shh, thank God. Oh. And then if you try to eat that newly entered gulab jamun into the syrup, you try to eat, what will happen? The sweetness hasn't entered all the way. How to fast track this? You can't take the fellow out and then inject him with sugar syrup all around. It still will be very patchy job. What do you have to do this fellow? You have to let him in. You keep him along with all the other students. soaking, 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 rasagulla, soaking, soaking, soaking. That rasa. And this is what the Taittiriya Upanishad says. Raso vaisaha rasadvihyevayam labdva nandi bhavati. This Atma, which is like rasagulla, which is rasa. Rasa means the truth, the essence, the kernel. It is full of that. And gaining this, anandi bhavati, the person becomes limitlessly joyful. Yeah. So the gulab jamun, a premature gulab jamun, a preemie gulab jamun, nobody likes. It is to be shunned. You know what? What are you going to do with it? You have to let it soak. So too, because you see there are all these barriers. After coming out of the hot oil of samsara and coming into this cool, lovely syrup scented with cardamom and saffron, saffron, Bhagavad Gita, cardamom, Upanishad, so all these things. what happens is, coming from that hot oil, that the chemical reaction of that hot oil has barricaded that certain, it has got a thick skin, a very thick and barrier, that's the skin. And then yes, it is a little porous due to Purva Punya, but then inside there are all these, the flower has congealed in certain places, correct? Due to Papa, and then resistance. So if you take that Gulab Jamun to be the head of the potential student, there are certain areas which are porous where the knowledge goes through, certain areas just like the blind side in a car, you're good driving and if there is another car right there you don't see. That's what is called being blindsided. That's the blind spot. So certain areas about oneself, about the universe, about others you are not able to see that at all. So how can you correct something when you're not even able to see? So therefore, let it soak. Yeah. Take it out, press it, squeeze it a little bit from all angles. Not yet ready. Plop, back. Back in the classroom situation. Now it is 8 o'clock. No, not quite ready. 4 o'clock. We'll test it again. Plop. Another day. Plop. Yes, this is how it is. And then a time comes, when it is tinned. Yes. Not the knowledge, the Gulab Jamun. It is tinned and exported. It is canned and exported. Yes. That's why teachers coming from India. And then what happens? Gulab Jamun is soaking in it. This soaking, the jiva soaking in this fragrant syrup of the Upanishad has become paripakva, has ripened, has no hard angles. It's all soft, no congealed matter, only grey matter. And then, all just soaked full of, there is no person that is not, that is without the knowledge. You cannot say where is the sugar, where is the Gulab Jamun, there is no separation. The person has become the sugar syrup entirely. And that is when such a person is unleashed to the world, may be unleashed to teach. Correct? Yeah. So that others can imbibe with and such a and when such a person teaches, it blesses without residue. Correct? That is the beauty of this. So then what is the hurry? Soak. Keep soaking. What's the rush? Oh, I have to get the knowledge right now. Why the pressure? Soak. First soksha, then moksha. Keep soaking. So this is what is called Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is soaking, and in between I take a little break from soaking, reading, cooking, cleaning, working, job, home, soaking again. Yes, some things I can do while soaking. Yeah, some things I have to get out a little bit and soak, and when I get out I feel like, oh, I'm losing my sweetness. No, run back in. This is what the whole thing is about. Raso Vaisaha. Yes, this is full of rasa. And this rasatma, this atma which is full of rasa is myself alone. Rasa means that truth, that joyousness, that unending limitlessness which is myself alone. That is the rasa. And it's already there. It's not to be gained. It's not that the sugar syrup has made me sweet. That's what I'm thinking. That is a little adhyasa that this jiva has put over the knowledge. The sugar syrup has just removed the barriers. The Upanishad, what does the sugar syrup exemplify? The teaching, the sweet teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, because the Gita is the sugar syrup here in which I have to soak for 18 long chapters. And that has transformed me, yes. But what all it has done is that without expending anything, it has brought out my own sweetness by reminding me of who I am. So the external sugary syrup reminds me of how sweet I am. It brings out the sweetness from within. So it's no more an artificial kind of a thing. But it's the soaking that brings it out. The longer I soak, the longer it is. The stronger it is, the clarity. The stronger is the doubtlessness. The stronger is this freedom from any kind of vagueness, any kind of wrong understanding, wrong assimilation, error. This is the lifestyle that is actually recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. But people erroneously think, what do they think? They think that this is all about action. It's about letting the actions transform you into being a person that is like a sponge, the one who can absorb the sweet teachings. That's what it is. It's not about action. Tasmad yuddhaya yujyasva. Therefore, get ready for battle. So long as you fight the battle, Arjuna is told, not in your name, in my name. Oh, since when did Bhagavan, this is another famous problem. Since when did God become so bloodthirsty? God wants Arjuna to fight. God doesn't want Arjuna to fight. Arjuna wants to fight, or wanted to fight until he got knock-kneed, at the sight of his uncle and grandfather. That is what happened. God doesn't, Bhagavan is not wanting Arjuna to fight. Arjuna wanted to fight. Arjuna is equal to some kind of a military general. He went into war. He signed the whole war documents. And he went into war. And then suddenly wants to become a pacifist after leading all the men into war. This is not fair? Yeah, because he discovered a cousin on the other side. Oh, you were fighting, okay, suddenly I feel I don't want this war. So this is what is called dharma sankata, karma sankata. Sankata means a conflict, a sorrowful conflict, a sorrow-ridden, fear-ridden conflict centered on how to use this karma for preparation. Because there are certain things I absolutely don't want to do, and I will not do it. There is a stubbornness. Those parts which don't absorb the sweetness. In every jiva there is that stubbornness. I will do everything except this. I will do everything except that. This I will not do. Here is where I draw the line, Lakshmana also drew a line. What happened? Nothing. So this is what it is. So there are all these offenses and defenses that have to come down. And so Adi Shankara says that this is how the Bhagavad Gita has to be taken, as the proponent of, that which propounds two lifestyles. For what? For solving the problem of what is called samsara. And what is samsara? My own inability to accept the orders which control my life. Whether it's the physiological order, the anatomical order, the order of the seasons, the order of the climate or order of climate change, the order of politics, the order of the botanical order, the trees around me. All these are orders. And why are they called orders? Because they are very orderly. Because it is that intelligence expressed in the form of this order. Order means law. There are laws in the universe which are a thorn in my side because I don't like this law. So what are you going to do about it? I'm going to pretend it's not there. I don't like the law of gravity, one fellow said. So I'm going to pretend it's not there and jump off a cliff and sail and have a nice view. Famous last words. That's all. Last thoughts. Yeah, what's good? I mean, you can't pretend there is no gravity. You'll fall flat on your face. No, I'm going to pretend that it's not raining. How can you pretend it's not raining? You people in Eugene do it all the time. You can't pretend it's not there. That means being in dissociation and denial. What is the problem? The problem is one of denial. So from denial you have to grow into acceptance. That is the readiness, that is the process of cultivating the readiness for Vedanta. That is the growth. Don't be in a state of denial all the time. This doesn't exist, so I'm going to pretend, it's not, this is uncomfortable, so I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. That's what you did when you were 2, not 92. That is, how the children escape to that happy place. This is not happening. Nobody is yelling at me. Father is not beating me. Mother is not, looking on without doing anything. Yeah, this is how the children get into that happy place. That happy place is called the unconscious. Yes. This is the time to be conscious, not unconscious. That is the coping mechanism or a moping mechanism. When you are 2, this is not a sign of growth. This is a sign of retreat. This is what Krishna started to, when Krishna started to teach, Arjuna started to suck his thumb. He was so upset. That's why he had to lay down the bow and the arrow. I will show you exactly the place where he started to suck his thumb. Because he had to pick up the blankie, the security blankie in one hand and started to suck his thumb. And you know what? This was not lost on Krishna. See, I am buttressing my argument. Because Bhagavan Krishna calls him, "Oh Kaunteya, Mama's boy." There are many words by which Arjuna is addressed by Lord Krishna. They are not accidental, they are very appropriate. So whenever he becomes this querulous, complaining, when the inner infant comes out, he calls him Partha. Pritha is another name for Kunti. And then, the other one is what? Kaunteya. Kuntehe apatyam puman. He is the son of Kunti. And what? Meaning, let go of the sari of the mommy. Otherwise we'll be very, very sorry. Yes. You're still that child who is looking for its mother. That child who is suffering from separation anxiety. This is the present day. Wake up. Wake up and smell the dust of the battlefield. This is what it is. This is Kurukshetra. Get out of your stuff. This is what it is. And that is what the Bhagavad Gita has, that power. It's about coming to a place. The whole teaching is about knowing that the problem is not the problem called samsara is really a problem of non-acceptance. On whose part? The neighbor doesn't accept me. No, on your own part. A problem called samsara. Samsara is equal to non-acceptance. That is really the one word definition of samsara is non-acceptance. Non-acceptance is samsara. Acceptance is moksha. That's all it is. And that non-acceptance is not an innocent non-acceptance. It's a very conniving non-acceptance. Because the non-acceptance goads you and leads you to try to change the situations, the orders that cannot be changed. Or can be changed, but then, requires a lot of effort. And if I don't put the right effort, I don't know how to change it. And since I don't know what is what, I just lash out at it and I'm not able to effect a change. The only thing that you can change, the Bhagavad Gita says, is you. The non-accepting fellow can be changed. You cannot change anything. There's nothing, what can you change? Everything changes on its own accord anyway. So since I cannot change anything, I also seem like I can't change. Then what can I do? I can just discover myself as the changeless one. I don't need to change. And in order to know that, I have to undergo some changes on the relative level. I have to undergo some changes. So samsara is equal to non-acceptance. And all the desires, see the non-acceptance, when you interrogate it, when you interview non-acceptance, hello non-acceptance, thank you for agreeing to come to this very important interview. Oh yes, thank you. So, my first question to you is, what fuels you? And what will non-acceptance reply? That is a good question. I refuse to answer because it is non-acceptance. No, I mean, really what will it say? It will say that I am fueled by fear. Underneath non-acceptance is what? Fear. Why do you not accept something? Because I'm afraid that if it is really like this and not how I want it to be, then I may be annihilated. There is no place for me. So it's based on fear. What else are you powered by? Anger. I'm powered by sorrow. I'm powered by self-judgment. What is all this pattern here? This is a buffet of ignorance. This is what it is. If ignorance had a buffet, this is what it would cough up and serve up. It would serve up all these things, and the host would be, the waiter would be non-acceptance with a towel draped over the shoulder. Come in, I'll show you to your seat. Ajnanam restaurant. And what are the items? You know? Yeah, Ragadvesha samosas with filling, complete with filling. Yeah. And then shoka. Shoka sauce, you dip the Ragadvesha samosa. And then what? Moha. Moha is the main dish. Delusion. Dished out. Dishes itself out. And the desert of hopelessness. That's all it is. Where you feel deserted at the end. That's all it is. This is what the whole smorgasbord of samsara is. And this non-acceptance is the key. Non-acceptance issues forth a whole lot of emotions, engages those emotions in a very crafty way and keeps one in a place of status quo. And by giving the false impression that one is in charge, that you can change everything. You just have to try harder, you have to try longer, you have to do this, you have to do that. Until the person tries everything. You know? And then what? Goes to a therapist. They all go to therapists because nothing works. For the therapist also nothing works. The therapist also, then they all come to Swamis, including the therapist. Because nothing works. So this is what samsara is that all the orders that reign in the universe, including the order of dharma and karma. Let's not forget that, because those are the two orders that affect me much more intimately than other orders. The order of the weather, I can wear a sweater and, get some comfort, or take the sweater off in the summer and get some comfort. But the order of dharma and karma cannot be taken off. It's a garb that is here to stay because it includes this body. And so what? I'm experiencing it every day. The good karma comes out. A moment of no pain, wonderful. Bad karma comes out alongside. This is the whole day. It's called Mishrita. Mishrita means it's mixed up. And that is what the human life is all about. It's the mixture of what we have during the new year. A little bit of neem and a little bit of jaggery. So neem and jaggery, the neem is bitter, the jaggery is sweet. So may I have the grace to be in acceptance. That is the festival. That is what we do. You make a drink out of it, or you eat it like that together. You chew the neem leaves. This is how you get by. This is how it is. So it is to beat out, like a sheet of metal is beaten out. All the dents, or actually here we should say, in case of the jiva that is being beaten out, the don'ts and the won'ts and the free will, which is a free won't. Yeah, it's a freedom to say I won't. Yeah. There was one person at the ashram long back, and I don't know where he is now. His name was Will. Anything you tell him to do, he says, I won't do it, I won't do it. Then I said we should change his name to won't. That's what the free will is all about. Won't do this, won't do that. This is the resistance. Because if you go and, as Swamiji says, rub up against a tree, who will get hurt, the bark or you? Yeah, you will get hurt. You remove your shirt, go against the tree and rub yourself up and down, who will get hurt? You poke your finger in the fire, who will get hurt? The fire is not going to say, oh, I have been fingered. No. The finger is going to say, oh, I have been fired. I have just I'm in pain. The fingers are going to say, I'm in pain. The fire is not going to say, oh, I have to have a bath because these horrible, dirty fingers have touched me. Fire is going to just say nothing. And if you have a, tiff with fire, did you burn me? Fire will say, yeah, I did. Why did you burn me? You can't ask the fire that. Because it did not come looking for you. You put your finger in it. This is a true case of karma and karma phala. So really speaking, the orders including the order of karma, are unfolding. And I have to dance this dance of jiva, cha-cha-cha, with grace. And without stepping on other people's toes. Without letting other people step on my toes. That is what the grace, the dance of grace is, for which I need oodles of grace, for which I need prayer, because prayer is also a karma that can negate all the other karmas that are coming, the mixed up karmas, good and bad, together. And so therefore, I become very prayerful. And this itself orients me towards the knowledge. This because I know I cannot change anything, and the only thing that I can change is myself. And the only change that needs to be effected is seeking the changeless one as I, knowing the changeless one as I. And therefore, the Gita becomes a upadesha, a teaching of how to accomplish this, how to, how to transform myself from a person who is a reactive person to a responsive and a responsible person. That reactivity is toned down. And this is not a teaching of passivity. It is a teaching of acceptance. We are not talking of the things you can change. Because nobody is going to come here and try to get educated or get knowledge about things they can already change. Oh, why are you here in class? Because the faucet is leaking, shower is leaking. Why aren't you fixing it? Well, because the Gita says accept. So I thought I should just let it go, let it drip, 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 drip. Nobody says that. You try everything, you fix it. What can be fixed, you fix. And then you drag into class what cannot be fixed. The Gita is the fix for that. Yes. And so, the jivas, the jivic mind is full of all kinds of, already I told you, impenetrable areas, like a fortress. And so, we have this thing called phalashruti. Phalashruti means praise of what happens when you gain this knowledge, what happens after you study this Upanishad. Usually it is at the end. It is called phalashruti. And the same kind of thing is repeated in the beginning. Verses of praise. So that, this hapless, hopeless, helpless jiva can kind of get a little boost in the arm to sit propped, These are the pillows. These verses are the pillows that prop up a nearly half-dead jiva who has dragged itself to class to be able to sit and listen to the rest of the teaching. So they are called dhyana shlokas. They are actually verses of praise. But they are called dhyana shlokas. Why? Because they put you in a contemplative and a place of awe, in an awesome place, filled with awe. And so the dhyana shlokas, there are 9 of them, I think. And then these 9 shlokas, what they do is that they praise the Mahabharata. Why? Because that is where the Bhagavad Gita is there. They praise Vyasa, the author. They praise also this Arjuna, the receiver of the knowledge. And then what? They praise the Lord, Narayana Bhagavan, out of whom this knowledge has come. They praise the other people who are studying the Gita. So this is a, sloka of praise. And they also elucidate the need to be prayerful, to be able to gain the grace of Bhagavan. And the grace is not something that is bestowed sporadically and partially. This Bhagavan is not some kind of a partial God bestowing, sprinkling grace on a chosen few and then telling others, you come, I am waiting for you. No. So the grace is that which is already there, which is tapped into by my own prayers. I have to grow the tap roots of prayers to reach this groundwater below, this groundwater of grace that helps me stay grounded. And there are verses of praise which help me to do that. And so, very beautiful set of verses. We'll start on the first one today and continue. Parthaya Pratibodhita. So the first verse praises the Gita. Hey Amba. Amba means mother. Hey Amba, vocative. Hey Amba, Tvam Anusandadhami. Look at the last line. Anu means just as you have been invoked before. By who? Arjuna and others. I, in keeping with that invocation, repeatedly invoke you, contemplate on you. For 18 long chapters, I'm going to be only thinking of you. I'm going to be with you, in you, surrounded by you. This is the sugar syrup in which I'm going to wallow. And so, hey Amba, oh mother. Why mother? Why not hey, Pitar? Why not? Why not? Father is usually a disciplinarian. What happened to the last pocket money? How come it was spent so quickly? What did you do? You're wasting your life. You're loitering around. Why aren't you studying? Strict, generally speaking. The mother is the one who said, don't say, tell father, here is some extra, something that I have saved, you can have it. Mother will be little more compassionate, little more forgiving, and all love, unconditional. And so, that's why yesterday I told you the Geetam has been converted to Gita. This mother here is Mother Shruti, the one who gives what is the best thing for the person. And the best thing for the person is this knowledge, this universal knowledge. Hey Amba, Tvam Anusandadhami. I follow you, I invoke you repeatedly. And who are you? Hey Amba Bhagavat Gita. Vocative again. Hey Amba Bhagavat Gita. O Mother Bhagavat Gita. I invoke you. And that is really the meaning of the whole thing. But then who is this you is qualified by a number of things, number of beautiful epithets. You who were taught in full to Partha, the son of another mother called Pritha, to Arjuna, you who were taught. By whom? Bhagavata, third case. This is a very easy verse, very beautiful. Bhagavat, and then Bhagavan, Bhagavantau, Bhagavantah, Bhagavantam, Bhagavantau, Bhagavatah, and then Bhagavata. By Bhagavan. Who was this Bhagavan? Narayanena, again third case. Swayam, by Narayana himself. And we'll see what Narayana is, but for now just see this. You who are taught by Bhagavan Narayana himself. How? Through this beautiful set of garland of verses strung together, Grathitam. Why? How? By Vyasa, Vyasena Grathitam. Oh, Vyasa came. Who is this Vyasa? Purana Munina. Doesn't mean ancient sage, means the sage who is the author of the Puranas. And where was this garland strung together? In the middle of the Mahabharata. Madhye Mahabharatam. And who else are you? You are in the form of that non-dual knowledge, Advaitam. And you reign this knowledge of non-duality, Amrita Varshini. You are that goddess who reigns. Non-duality surrounds me in non-duality. And with the teaching of non-duality, Amrita Varshinim, you reign the nectar of oneness. And you have 18 arms. Durga has 10. You are better than Durga. You have 18 arms in the form of chapters. And this is who you are. You are that who is, Dashaadhyayini. And I invoke you, why? Because you are Bhavadveshini. You have gotten over all your raga and dveshas except one. Oh, Bhagavad Gita mother also has a dvesha? Only one. What is that dvesha? Samsara. She hates samsara. Bhavadveshini, destroyer. Here dvesha must be taken as destroyer, the annihilator of samsara. So here the teaching is eulogized and incarnated into a Devi, into a deity, into Bhagavati, who basically spreads this knowledge, which is a salve for the wounds of samsara, which removes samsara, because she cannot stand samsara. So wherever she goes, samsara is not. And if she presides in my head and heart, there samsara is not. She cannot tolerate samsara. So this kind of a goddess, so the first invocation is to the goddess Bhagavad Gita of true, complete resplendence, which is the self-effulgent self, which is now has come to me in the form of these teachings. I bow to you repeatedly. Bless me with the same hatred of samsara that you have. Bless me by coming and abiding in my heart and destroying samsara within forever. What about the samsara without? That's why we have 18 chapters. Aramse. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.